I'm going to use this so that I can yell at you if you fall asleep. Just kidding. Okay. All right, I'm going to give my testimony today. Some of this is an adoption testimony. Some of it is salvation testimony. Some of this is answered prayers that God has answered. And I'm going to read what I typed out just because there's a lot of details and I don't want to leave anything out. So there was an 18-year-old girl who hated herself and everyone around her. She hated life. She lived in sin and was falling deeper and deeper into darkness. She spewed out cuss words from her mouth left and right. This girl was full of anger and depression. She hated herself so much that sometimes she would punch and bite herself just to bring pain. She even hated life to the point that she wanted to commit suicide. My goal is to not cry through this today. Her days were full of writing demonic poetry and creating demonic artwork, and she never gave any thought to God. She said that she didn't need God at all. But there was a God who gave thought to her. And when this girl said she did not need him, God showed her that he was the one thing she actually needed the most. When there was depression, he gave joy. When there were suicidal thoughts, he gave life. When there was bondage of sin, he gave freedom. And when there was impurity, he gave cleansing. That girl was me, and this is my God story that God wrote. At 18 years old, after another night of sinful living, I was on my way back home. I looked up at the night sky and heard a voice calling my name. But it wasn't an audible voice. It was a still, small voice calling out to me through creation. Actually, through the stars and the darkness of the night. That still, small voice was God. And for the first time, I sensed God's presence in my life. At some point after that, I knew I needed to be in church. I was miserable. I had no joy, no peace. I knew I needed to find God, whatever that meant, and whoever God actually was, I wasn't sure. I just knew that I needed to find God, whoever that was. I didn't even know who God was. I visited a few different churches, but every time I left, I still felt empty inside. And I thought, why did I not feel any better? I thought whatever it was that I was seeking had to be found in church, because that's where all the happy people are. Well, one night after church, I looked up at the night sky again, and I said, God, I know that you're there. I don't know how to find you, but one day I will. I eventually ended up at a different church during a revival one Sunday, and I heard the gospel many times before that, but this time it was different. God brought me face to face with my sin and my need for Jesus. During the invitation, God's conviction gripped my heart, and I knew he was speaking directly to me. When the pastor asked for a raise of hands for anyone who wasn't sure if they would go to heaven one day, I very timidly raised mine, but I was too scared to go forward. I didn't know anybody there, and I didn't like being in front of people. And I still don't, but yet here we are. So, then a lady who had seen me raise my hand, she came up to me in the pew. I walked with her to a classroom where she went through the gospel with me, and she introduced me to Jesus. And on March 14th, 2004, I told God I was sorry for my sin and accepted Jesus as my Savior. And that day, God took away all of my sins. He took away my hatred for myself and for people. He took away my depression. He took away my self-harm and profanity, and he set me free from the darkness I had been in for so long. When I said, one day I will find you, it wasn't me that was actually seeking him. It was God that was seeking me the whole time. And when did he call out to me? Was it when I had all my ducks in a row? Was it when I had cleaned myself up and I was perfect in my own eyes? No, it was when I was at the lowest point in my life. He reached down to me in the filth and sin and brokenness. He completely changed me from within and changed the course of my entire life. Well, that was the beginning of my God story. When God began seeking me, his lost sheep. When he began knocking on the door of my heart, it began with me asking for his free salvation through Jesus. Well, shortly after I got saved, God led me to go to college at Pensacola Christian College. And I won't go into all the details for sake of time, but basically I didn't have the money to go, and I also did not have my parents' blessing to go. My mom told me that I wasn't smart enough to do the schoolwork, that it was too expensive, that it was too far away, and basically every excuse that she could come up with, she said to me to keep me at home. And one of the last things that she said to me before I left was, "Mark my words, you'll be back home in 3 weeks." During that time, there was so much tension in my home between my parents and I, but I was determined to do what God had called me to do. So, for about 6 months, I prayed and prayed that, number one, that God would provide all the money that I would need to go to school, and that, number two, that God would change my parents' hearts so that they would let me go. And I told my mom, God will provide the money, just wait and see. He will make a way for me to go. And after 6 months, he did. And because that is when there's a vision, there is provision. And when God calls you to do something, he's going to provide for whatever it is he's calling you to do. And in the end, God did provide a way for me to go to school through a special work contract where I would work every summer and every semester to pay off the tuition. This would take me 5 years to finish instead of the typical 4. And then God also changed my dad's heart, and my dad gave me his blessing to go. On the night before I left for college, I looked at all of my packed up belongings that were in my room, and I thought, there's no way that I can do this. I can't leave home. I can't follow this God that I've only known for maybe a year. I was still a brand new Christian, and I just didn't know a lot. And so I thought, there's no way I can do this. And I was scared to follow God, but he kept reassuring my heart that he would be with me and he would provide every step of the way. And through my entire 5 years at school, my mom continued to bombard me with verbal attacks and doubts. When I told her that I had however many years left until I would graduate, she would say, "I'll believe it when I see it." And during those years, I was at times tempted to give up and quit. But I worked every semester and every summer to pay off my classes. And this was completely God's provision. There was no other way to explain it. However, I worked so much while taking classes that it put my body into some type of a chronic stress mode, which ended up causing extreme physical pain. And some people handle stress differently. Some people get horrible headaches. Some people freak out, for lack of a better word. Or some people may not get stressed at all. I don't know. I'd like to meet you if you never get stressed. But my body handled it just in a physical way. And through the 5 years I was in college, I was in horrible pain for about 4 of those years. From the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, I lived in constant pain. And it wasn't just a headache or a migraine, but it was a very sharp pain that started in my neck and radiated up my head and around my eye. It also shot all the way down my right side, down my arm and my leg, and it caused tingling and made it very difficult to walk around campus. I hardly had a day when I did not have pain. Every day was a struggle as I tried to work and study while attempting to survive day in and day out with this pain. And I was so tempted to quit and go back home, but I knew that God did not call me to quit. I had to keep my eyes on him and on what he had called me to do. So I hung up a sign in my dorm room that said, "But he chose to go on beneath the weight of the cross." Just as, and none of our suffering can ever compare to what Jesus went through. So I'm not comparing it to that, but just the fact that Jesus chose to go on beneath the weight of his cross, and he would be strength for me, for any of us, to continue to go on whatever we're facing. So I put that sign up in my room. Every day I would wake up and see it, and it was the encouragement I needed to go through another day. So what cross are you carrying today? You may not have a physical cross or one that we can see, A lot of people walk around in pain. A lot of people walk around with different hardships, and you don't know what they are, but still they're carrying something very heavy. And whether it be pain or depression, a tragedy, death of family, financial problems, or suicidal thoughts, Jesus comes along to help you carry your cross no matter how heavy it is. And as your knees buckle under the weight, he is the strength that keeps you from being buried beneath the load. Will he ever give you more than you can bear? Absolutely, but just so that his strength can be made known in your weakness. So by God's grace, I graduated from college with my teaching degree, which is funny because before I went to school, I said, I hope God doesn't call me to teach because I could never do that. And then he's like, oh yeah, watch this. So never tell God you're not going to do something or can't do something. But I did graduate after 5 years. I walked across that stage, received my diploma, and was even able to give a short speech. I graduated with my school tuition being completely paid off, except for about $900, which I paid off shortly after that. My parents were not there for the graduation, but that's okay because God was. Unfortunately, the chronic pain that I had all through college followed me into the next stage of life, which was marriage. This pain left me suffering on the couch, unable to hold down a job, unable to keep up with my house. It greeted me in the morning, sucked the life out of me through the day, and made its bed with me at night. The only relief I got was at night when I could fall asleep. But then to only be awakened to the same pain again the next morning. It was like a bloodthirsty leech that refused to let go no matter what I did. I remember getting so angry at God, so much that I wrote a letter to him that said, I'm done with life, I'm done with pain, done with tears, done with doctors, done with long days and painful mornings and nights when it only temporarily ends. I give up and I'm done. I'm not living a life of pain anymore. I can't serve God like this, so I'm done. Done with headaches and neck pain and sickness. Why go through life this way? Because I have for too long. I'm not going through life like this anymore. I don't want to. I'm sick of being sick. Just take me home to heaven because this isn't life. And then I wrote, God, are you even there? It doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like you even care. Why do I suffer all the time? Don't you think I ever get tired of it? Do you really think it's fun? Because it really isn't. In fact, it's ruining my life. Why won't you just answer my prayers? Probably because you don't even hear them. So I know all of you are perfect saints and you have never had questions like that to God, right? But I kept that and I processed that same emotions for a long time. And I don't remember how long ago it was that I wrote that. It's been a while, over 10 years. But I couldn't understand how I could effectively serve God if I suffered in pain all the time. I could barely walk, much less serve God at any capacity. And I eventually hit rock bottom, and I wanted my life to end. I didn't want to live if I had to be in excruciating pain all the time. I begged God over and over to heal me, but he didn't. I prayed for healing, but the healing never came. I asked God questions like, why, God? Why do you allow me to suffer? You could easily take this pain away, because you can do anything. I want to serve you on the mission field, but I can't in this condition. So why not just allow me to die? And I remember a few times when I mentally snapped and screamed out in pain as I started kicking things, trying to knock them over. Michael had to hold me down so I wouldn't hurt myself or hurt stuff around me. But even in the chaos, God was with me. Even when I could not hear his voice or sense him, he was still there. Even if I was spiraling out of control in the midst of the storm, God held me in his hands. Because without rain, we cannot have flowers. Without storms, there is no growth. Without trials, we won't come forth as gold. And so what was God doing in all of this? I wasn't sure, but apparently my growth was more necessary than my healing at the time. And so God allowed the pain to stay for a total of over 20 years. And yes, even during my time here at Bethel, I have continued to deal with this pain. Over 20 years of chronic pain. I did have a little relief here and there, but it always came back. My depression also came back, along with my anger at God. But at some point, things changed in my heart and in my attitude as my view of the storm shifted. And instead of asking, what is this storm doing to me? I started to ask, what is this storm doing for me? The chaos inside of me eventually ceased. The anger towards God vanished. The swirling storm inside my mind stopped. And suddenly I had peace. And suddenly I had joy. Even though I still had the physical pain, something deep down inside of me had healed. True joy and peace had grown inside of me. And there's a song called Flowers, which we sang a few months ago. And in that song, she says, I brought it up in a desperate prayer. Lord, why are you keeping me here? Then he said to me, child, I'm planting seeds. Next one. I'm a good God and I have a good plan. So trust that I'm holding the watering can. And then someday you'll see that flowers grow in the valley. And one more. When I'm on the mountain and looking down below, I'll see a valley of flowers that needed time to grow. And I'll thank you for the rain, the hurt, and days of pain. So that song really spoke to me that God may take us through the valley. He's not going to leave you on the mountain all the time. But in the valley is where good things happen. Good things grow. He's planting seeds, and it takes time. And sometimes it may take a week. Sometimes it may take 20 years, whatever his timing is. And that song really spoke to me about that. Well, choosing joy is a constant, everyday decision. Joy and praise had to be formed inside of me, and it was formed through the chronic pain. So do we choose joy when healing does not come? Do we choose joy when financial hardships come? What about when we lose a baby through miscarriage? Or when we've lost that baby that we prayed for so long? Or we've struggled with infertility from year to year? And all these things I've dealt with in my own life. For many years, I did not choose joy in pain. I chose bitterness, depression, defeat. For many years, I chose jealousy and discontentment as I struggled also with infertility. And my plan was to have 6 kids. I wanted a whole house full of children, but soon realized that my plan wasn't exactly what God's plan was. One negative pregnancy test after another, and Caleb kept growing older. My heart broke more and more because I wanted to have a big family. There's a type of grief that you experience when someone dies, and then there's a type of grief you experience when you long for a child who has not even come yet. But I realized I had a choice to make, a choice of bitterness or joy, a choice of sorrow or praise. So was I really going to live in discontentment over something that God had withheld? I started counting my blessings and remembered all the prayers he had already answered. So who was I to complain that he had not given us another child or had taken my pain away? And I think about a time when we gave Caleb a gift. It was a tape of music we had found at Goodwill, just like a 50-cent thing. And even though he was happy to receive it when we gave it to him, he still looked up at us and said, "Is there anything else?" And then I thought, do we do that with God? Even though he has given us healing and salvation, families, provision, all these blessings that he's given to us, do we look up at him with empty hands and ask, is there anything else, God? Because this isn't enough. What else do you have? Do we really complain about the one thing that we lack, that he hasn't given to us? That doesn't mean to stop praying, but to instead to choose joy in the waiting. I finally decided to choose joy in my infertility and in my physical pain, and then my entire heart changed. And so what about you? Have you ever had to wait for something? And I know we all love waiting for stuff. Something that you have kept praying and praying for, but heaven still seems silent. Sometimes God just makes us wait. What have you begged God for? For healing, provision? How long have you prayed, and how long are you willing to keep praying? I sought God in prayer countless times as I begged him to grow our family, but still heaven was silent. And I had my own plans of having a large family, but usually when we make our own plans, I think God starts laughing because he knows better than we do. My plan was to do this, or my plan was to do that. And I know some of this you heard a few months ago when I shared it for our adoption story, but you get to hear it again. So when my plan of having a large family was not working out too well, and my prayers seemed to be bouncing off the walls, I battled a deep sadness over shattered dreams of what I thought my life should look like. At the start of the year of 2021, I had asked God for a word or phrase for the new year, which he replied of new life. And I thought, okay, new life, that's kind of weird, but I wrote it down. And then at the beginning of February, I sat down to do my morning devotions. I was finally at peace with having an only child and had given it to God. I started my prayer time and wasn't even intending on praying for another child. But then I found myself begging God one last time for my miracle, asking him one last time for another child. And the words and tears poured. So a few days later, on the following Sunday, Pastor started the service talking about fostering and adoption. He mentioned that the church is there to help anyone who is considering becoming a foster or adoptive parent. And I immediately sensed God speaking to me. He said, so why don't you adopt? And then I thought, there's no kids for us to adopt, and it's very expensive and we can't afford it. So the next morning, I was doing my devotions again, and then I came to the verse that says, to redeem them that are under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And I'm not the type of person that would just open my Bible and point to a random verse and say, that's what God's trying to tell me to do today. So that was the next part of the Bible that I had in my reading plan for that day. And then the next morning, I started reading my Bible again and came across the verse that said, having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself. And then I really sensed God speaking to me and thought maybe he was trying to get our attention. It was like a light came on when I read that verse. And I thought, is he trying to tell us something? Is he wanting us to adopt? And I started writing different prayers in my Bible. And I wrote, are you doing something in my heart? Do you want us to adopt? I am more than willing to adopt if this is what you're leading us to do. If it's your will, would you please open the door and make provision for us and lead us to the exact baby or child that you have? We want your hand in this from the start to the finish. And then another prayer was, how are you leading us? If given a choice whether to have my own child or to adopt one, I would choose adoption. I believe fully that you're more than able to lead us and provide all the money. I am willing to work hard to do any fundraising that I have to do. I know that your provision will come. You adopted me, you rescued me, and brought me into your family as your own, and I want to do the same for another child, to give them a new life. And I think I was worried about finances at the time because adoptions are very, very expensive, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I was also worried about the chronic physical pain that I had. But God knows our thoughts and fears, and that morning he gave me confirmation that he would enable us to do whatever he called us to do. And he reassured me that he would give me grace and strength to endure. We talked with Pastor about wanting to adopt, and he asked us, have you ever thought about becoming foster parents? I said, nope, in my head. Having random children in my home that I don't even know, and who knows what kind of behavior they will have, count me out. I wanted to adopt a newborn baby that wouldn't give me any trouble, that I could raise from the beginning, not random children just plopped into my home for some unknown amount of time, ready to be snatched away when they're reunited with their own families. The idea of adoption is that we get to keep them forever, not say bye to them. So God, you called us to adopt, right? So foster care really isn't part of your plan, right? And I thought he had got something wrong along the way. Well, the next few days I kept praying about all of this, and I kept fighting God. There was no way ever I was going to become a foster parent and have children I didn't know living in my home. Was God crazy? I'm pretty sure at the moment he was, but he still knows better than we do. And then that brings me to another morning of reading my Bible when I came to pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction and to keep himself unspotted from the world. And the fatherless being children in foster care. And I was like, okay, God, you have spoken loud and clear. You couldn't speak any clearer. And if this is what you have for us to do, then we'll do it. But then I started doubting. Why would God call us to be foster parents? I'm the wrong one. I thought I was weak. I have physical pain. I'm out of commission on a lot of the nights at home because I'm just laying on the couch. And you truly must have chosen the wrong person. But then I knew his voice, and I knew that he had what he had told us to do. And so we surrendered it all to him. My prayer was, please bring beauty from these ashes, somehow give back what has been lost. I have regretted and grieved. I have cried and healed and grieved again. I had my perfect little family planned out, and I know it's okay to grieve. So what is your will and plan for our life and for our family? As I set my desires aside to embrace your desires, what is it that you would have us to do? In my own strength, I wanted to grow my family my way. In my own strength, I wanted my plan to be done, and I thought I knew what was best. But when God steps in, everything changes. And he spoke to me and said, build my kingdom and not your own. And for sake of time, I won't go into all the little details of how we got licensed and all the ups and downs with that. But we eventually did get licensed as foster parents and ended up having a total of 8 children in our home. Actually 9 over the weekend, but it was just an overnight stay. So, and after some pretty difficult placements, we decided to take a break from fostering altogether. And we thought we might just be done because it had been so bad. Until one day when we received a message from the DSS that they were looking for a home to provide respite care for a 10-year-old girl for about 9 days. And respite care is just when you take care of children that are in another foster home. Maybe the foster parents have to go on a trip or something, or they just need a break for a few days. So that's what we were doing. But we were still technically on our own break from a previous placement, and we just weren't sure. So we thought, well, we can handle anything for 9 days, right? It's just 9 days. So we agreed for Adela to come. And then we found out that she had a 7-year-old brother, Anthony, who was staying with another family for a respite break. And during that time, we found out that both of them would eventually need an adoptive home. Their previous foster mom asked if we knew of anyone who could adopt because she was facing a life transition. Well, of course, our antenna went up because we wanted to adopt. Anthony ended up staying with us for 2 days of his respite time so that we could meet him. And then once their respite break was over, they went back to their previous foster mom for a few weeks and then came back to us. Lots of little details, but they came back to us eventually. So you may be thinking, you agreed to adopt 2 children, only having them in your home for a few short days and not really knowing them? Pretty much, yes. And Adela and Anthony officially moved to our home in January of 2024, and then adoption was soon to follow, right? Nope. Another detour. because nothing with DSS is ever fast. Through the course of those 2 years, the enemy has tried throwing some of his own detours across our path to keep this adoption from happening. Kind of like the Nintendo Mario Kart racing game where you shoot out those bananas from your backside to wreck the other players behind you. At least that's how it felt like, trying to dodge all the obstacles. There's been one obstacle after another as the enemy has sought to destroy our family through false accusations and our ministry. But of course, God prevailed. And after 1,382 days of being in foster care, we were finally able to adopt Anthony and Adela and make them a part of our family. And I honestly wondered if that adoption day would ever come. Through this journey and all of its detours and ups and downs, I've learned that none of this is about me. It's not about me wanting a big family. It's not about me fulfilling my dream of lots of children. And it's not about me completing my family. Because again, God says to build his kingdom and not my own. This story is about these children and all the children that are in foster care and God's plan for them. It's about God redeeming the brokenness, about God turning ashes into beauty and creating something beautiful from all the bad and hard stuff along the way. And sometimes it may seem that God has gotten things mixed up, like when he called us to be foster parents, and when all the different detours come along the way. But he has a reason for each of the trials. God can use the greatest pain in our lives to launch our greatest calling. And he can breathe life, new life into dead and broken things. I tell you this adoption story to encourage you that nothing is too hard for God. I asked him to grow our family. I sought him earnestly for another child. I knocked and pounded upon his door until he finally answered. And through years and years of infertility and negative pregnancy tests, my prayer was answered, just not in the way that I had originally thought it would be. He used the pain of infertility to lead us into something greater, growing our family through adoption. Now that we stand at the other side of the adoption finish line, past all the bumps and potholes and detours, I remember the words that God gave to me when we first started on this journey. In all of the areas that I have stepped out in faith before, I have never regretted it. I can say I am glad I did. I am glad I follow God. And I know that following God and adoption will prove the same if his hand is in it all. I don't ever want to look back and say, I wish I had. I want to say, remember when God called us to adopt and we didn't have the money and I still suffered in pain. And then I can say that yes, and God provided it all and gave me grace and strength to endure. Is it your plan? Give me a water break for a moment. So, what's in your season of waiting and asking and seeking and knocking? I encourage you to keep praying for your miracle. If God hasn't answered yet, there are still prayers to pray. Don't give up and don't lose faith. One more prayer to God could be all that it takes. And if you have seen answers to prayer, think back to the thing you kept praying for. Aren't you glad that you didn't stop? Aren't you glad that you prayed that one last prayer? Ask, seek, and knock until he answers. And if he says yes, then say thank you. If he says no, then rest in his will. And if he has not given you a definite answer, then keep on praying. But maybe you're not waiting on a particular answered prayer. Maybe you've hit rock bottom just like I did a long time ago. Maybe you're at the end of your rope, and maybe you're just done, just like I was when I wrote that letter to God. And you're secretly wishing that God would just take you home early, or maybe you're tempted to even take your own life. But I encourage you, don't give up, and hold on just a little bit longer, because there's a light in the darkness, a rainbow past the storm, an end to the suffering, and a garden that grows after the rain. He chose to go on beneath the weight of his cross, and he will come alongside you to help you carry on beneath the weight of yours. My cross for so long was my chronic physical pain, and even though I had come to a place of peace and acceptance, Michael had not. He prayed and begged God for my healing. He poured himself out before God, sometimes in desperation, but even more times in just outright anger. It tore him up on the inside, watching me suffer every single day. And just when he didn't know what to pray anymore, God showed up and answered his prayer in an unexpected way. Last September, as you know, Michael was diagnosed with Bell's palsy, which is a condition that paralyzes half of your face. He immediately made an appointment with an ENT to get it checked on, and while he was there, he told them about me and how I have constant high-pitched ringing on the right side of my head. And they recommended that I come in and make an appointment too. So I went to that appointment and left with a prescription for a medicine that was supposed to reduce the loudness of the ringing. I started the medicine and realized that in just a few days or so that the ringing was actually better. And then a few more weeks went by and I noticed something else. I realized that I had not had any pain in about a month. I continued on the medicine, and still, month after month, I was still pain-free. And I thought, okay, is it the medicine or is this just coincidence? What's going on? So as I researched more about the medicine, I found out that it was actually used to reduce nerve pain. So I originally went to the doctor for this loud, constant ringing on the side of my head. But then I ended up getting medicine that helped me to heal the pain that I had suffered with for over 20 years. This whole time, Michael thought that God was not hearing his prayers, but God did hear, and he answered in a way that we didn't expect. It never would have crossed my mind to go to an ENT for the pain. Had it not been for Michael getting the Bell's palsy, he probably would not have gone to the ENT either. Had he not gone to the doctor, he would not have told them about the ringing in my head. And had I not had the ringing to begin with, I probably would have never even have tried this medicine. So some say that's a coincidence, but I say that's God. And I can say with confidence and thanksgiving that despite a few flare-ups here and there, that God has 95% healed me. But we had to keep on asking and keep on seeking and keep on knocking on his door. It took over 20 years for that prayer to be answered. 20 years of banging on God's door. And as I look back on that valley of pain and depression that I walked through, I can see the growth and the fruit and the flowers that sprung up along the journey. Well, the last thing that I would like to say for today is at the start of this new year, I asked God for a word, kind of like a theme for the year. And one year it was growth, and one year it was new life. Well, this year, he gave me the word rest. And I thought, that's strange because the last thing that I think of as a mom is to rest. Between trying to keep all the kiddos on track with school, trying to keep all the plates spinning at once without them crashing, trying to help Michael keep all his ducks in a row, which is a full-time job, the word rest doesn't really pop up in my mind. Instead, it's more like the word panic as we're flying out the door, trying to make sure we're not late. I'm sure no one has that problem. So I thought, rest, what does he mean by rest? Rest in my healing that I prayed for, but it was something even more than that. Within a time frame of about 4 to 6 weeks, both of our cars broke down, costing over $1,000 to repair. I guess they probably rebelled from all the driving we were putting them through. During that time, we also found out that Michael has a 2-centimeter brain tumor. Thankfully, it's not cancerous, and it's being treated with medication. Thankfully, he doesn't have to have surgery. But it's actually a tumor on his pituitary gland, which has led to his diabetes and not being able to lose weight, all that stuff. And because the tumor led to diabetes, his feet are now in constant pain, and this is making it harder every day for him to walk. And then on top of all of that, we also found out that Michael had been laid off from his full-time job, which is our main source of income. So it's kind of like the domino effect. One thing happens and it's doo, 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 doo. So, but then even in all of that, God continues to say to rest. So I'm gonna rest in all these bad things happening. I'm gonna rest in the fact that I probably should be freaking out right now. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that feels like that. But he said, rest in him, rest in his provision, rest in his presence, and rest in his peace. And though everything may be swirling in chaos around us, though the noise of the storm may be louder than we can bear, though the rain may be pleading down on us in the valley, God wants us to rest in him because he can give peace in the chaos. His voice can be heard over the noise of the storm. He walks with us through the darkest valley. And I'm reminded that even after the worst of storms, the sun will return and the flowers will grow. Rest in him as you keep on asking, as you keep on seeking, and as you keep on knocking on his door, because he hears you and he will open the door at just the right time. So I want you to think of the one thing that you've been praying for the most. Just take 10 seconds to get it in your mind. And I want you to think for how long you've been praying for that. Maybe it's just been a few days. Maybe it's been 20, 30 years. I don't know. God knows what you've been praying. And I want you to think about how many times you've actually asked him for it, or sought him for it, or banged on his door. And that will either encourage you to keep doing it, to keep knocking, or to bring conviction that maybe we haven't been praying enough for stuff. Not stuff, but we haven't been praying enough for that one or two things that we want to see God do. So whether it's healing or whatever it is, it could be anything, I don't know. But God does want to answer our prayers. And I wanted to close with a song that I wrote called Ask, Seek, Knock, which is a song of prayer. So there we go. I can't do technology without Michael, who will be proud of me. I want this prayer to go through. I want it to go straight to you. I keep asking and asking and pleading, so that I can us in closing. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you would be with each of us here, and you know exactly what is on all of our hearts. You know what we have prayed for day in and day out, and we just give those into your hands one more time. And we pray that you would come through, that you would answer according to your will and in your time. In Jesus' name, amen.